Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights cast and crew in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, we now bring to you our host and the star of this broadcast, Mr. Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet, across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that to our minds, as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes, and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the Great Disillusionment. It was near the end of October. Business was better. The war scare was over. More men were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crossley service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
For the next 24 hours, not much change in temperature. A slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is reported over Nova Scotia, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over the northeastern states, bringing a forecast of rain, accompanied by winds of light gale force. Maximum temperature 66, minimum 48. This weather report comes to you from the Government Weather Bureau. We now take you to the Meridian Room in the Hotel Park Plaza in downtown New York, where you will be entertained by the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza Hotel in New York City, we bring you the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra. With a touch of the Spanish, Ramon Raquello leads off with La Compasita. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving towards the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Peason of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York. And now a tune that never loses favor, the ever-popular Stardust. Ramon Raquello and his orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we have arranged an interview with noted astronomer Professor Peason, who will give us his views on the event. In a few moments, we will take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, New Jersey. We return you until then to the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra. We are now ready to take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Richard Peason, famous astronomer. We take you now to Princeton, New Jersey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton. I'm standing in a large semicircular room, pitch black except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, I can see a sprinkling of stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over the intricate mechanisms of the huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the vibration of the clockwork. Professor Peason stands directly above me on a small platform, peering through a giant lens. I ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides his ceaseless watch of the heavens, Professor Peason may be interrupted by telephone or other communications. During this period, he is in constant touch with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
At any time, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea. Transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because Mars happens to be the point nearest the Earth. In opposition, as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Peason?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips. Although that's the popular conjecture of those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you're quite convinced as a scientist that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars?
I'd say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for those gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Mr. Phillips, I cannot account for it.
By the way, Professor, for the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance.
Thank you.
Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Someone has just handed Professor Peason a message. While he reads it, let me remind you that we are speaking to you from the observatory in Princeton, New Jersey, where we are interviewing the world-famous astronomer Professor Peason. One moment, please. Professor Peason has passed me a message which he has just received. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Phillips.
Ladies and gentlemen, I shall read you a wire addressed to Professor Peason from Dr. Gray of the National History Museum, New York. 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Princeton. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Professor Peason, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton, bringing you a special interview with Professor Peason, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We are returning you now to our New York studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, Here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News, Toronto, Canada. Professor Morris of McGill University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home comes a special announcement from Trenton, New Jersey. It's reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Elizabeth. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene, and we'll have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a word description as soon as he can reach there from Princeton. In the meantime, we take you to the Hotel Martinet in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music. We take you now to Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again at the Wilmoth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Professor Peason and myself made the 11 miles from Princeton in 10 minutes. Well, I hardly know where to begin to paint for you a word picture of the strange scene before my eyes, like something out of a modern Arabian Nights. Well, I just got here. I haven't had the chance to look around yet. I guess that's it. Yes, that's the thing directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit. Must have struck with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree it must have struck on its way down. What I can see of the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor, at least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. It has a diameter of, what would you say, Professor Peason?
What's that?
What would you say, what is the diameter?
About 30 yards.
About 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like it. The color is sort of yellowish-white. Curious spectators now are pressing close to the object in spite of the efforts of the police to keep them back. They're getting in front of my line of vision. Would you mind standing to one side, please?
Hey, one side there. One side.
While the policemen are pushing the crowd back, here's Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm here. He may have some interesting facts to add. Mr. Wilmoth, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember of this rather unusual visitor that dropped into your backyard? Step closer, please. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wilmoth.
Well, I was listening to the radio.
Closer and louder, please.
Pardon me?
Louder, please, and closer.
Well, yes, sir. Well, I was listening to the radio and kind of drowsing. That professor fellow was talking about Mars. So I was half dozing and half...
Yes, Mr. Wilmoth. Then what happened?
As I was saying, I was listening to the radio kind of halfways.
Yes, Mr. Wilmoth. And then you saw something?
Not first off. I heard something.
And what did you hear?
A hissing sound, like this. Kind of like a 4th of July rocket.
Then what?
Turned my head out the window and would have swore I was to sleep and dreaming.
Yes?
Well, I seen a kind of greenish streak and then single. Something smacked the ground. Knocked me clear out of my chair.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Wilmoth?
Well, I ain't quite sure. I reckon I was kind of riled.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmoth. Thank you.
Well, want me to tell you some more?
No, that's quite all right. That's plenty. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm where this thing has fallen. I wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are parked in a field in back of us. Police are trying to rope off the roadway leading to the farm, but it's no use. They're breaking right through. Cars' headlights throw an enormous spot on the pit where the object's half buried. Some of the more daring souls are now venturing near the edge. Their silhouettes stand out against the metal sheen. One man wants to touch the thing. He's having an argument with a policeman. The policeman wins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's something I haven't mentioned in all this excitement, but now it's becoming more distinct. Perhaps you've caught it already on your radio? Listen. Do you hear it? It's a curious humming sound that seems to come from inside the object. I'll move the microphone nearer. Now we're not more than 25 feet away. Can you hear it now? Oh, Professor Pearson.
Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Can you tell us the meaning of that scraping noise inside the thing?
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
I see. Do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial, not found on this Earth. Friction with the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in a meteorite. This thing is smooth and, as you can see, of cylindrical shape.
Just a minute. Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. The end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top is beginning to rotate like a screw. The thing must be hollow.
She's moving. Look, the darn thing's unscrewing. He's back there. He's back, I tell you. Maybe there's men in it trying to escape. It's red hot. They'll burn to a cinder. He's back there. Keep those idiots back. She's off. The top's loose. Look out there. Stand back.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrifying thing I have ever witnessed. Wait a minute. Someone's crawling out of the hollow top. Someone or something. I can see peering out of that black hole 2 luminous discs. Are they eyes? It might be a face. It might be... Good heavens! Something's wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one. And another. They look like tentacles to me. There. I can see the thing's body. It's large as a bear, and it glistens like wet leather. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. The eyes are black and gleam like a serpent. The mouth is V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move. It seems weighed down by possibly gravity or something. The thing's raising up. The crowd falls back now. They've seen plenty. This is the most extraordinary experience. I can't find words. I'll pull this microphone with me as I talk. I'll have to stop the description until I can take a new position. Hold on, will you please? I'll be right back in a minute.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmoth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. We now return you to Carl Phillips at Grover's Mill.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I on? Ladies and gentlemen, here I am back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmoth's garden. From here, I get a sweep of the whole scene. I will give you every detail as long as I can talk, as long as I can see. More state police have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit, about 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain is conferring with someone. We can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted. The professor moves around one side, studying the object, while the captain and 2 policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. A flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait. Something's happening. A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror. And it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Good Lord! They're turning into flame! Now the whole field caught fire! The woods, the barns, the gas tanks of automobiles, it's spreading everywhere! It's coming this way! About 20 yards to my left!
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have a late bulletin from San Diego, California. Professor Endelkoffer, speaking at a dinner of the California Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that the explosions on Mars are undoubtedly nothing more than severe volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet. We now continue with our piano interlude. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been handed a message that came in from Grover's Mill by telephone. Just a moment. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field east of the village of Grover's Mill. Their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you hear will be that of Brigadier General Montgomery Smith, commander of the state militia at Trenton, New Jersey.
I've been requested by the governor of New Jersey to place the counties of Mercer and Middlesex as far west as Princeton and east to Jamesburg under martial law. No one will be permitted to enter this area except by special pass issued by state or military authorities. 4 companies of state militia are proceeding from Trenton to Grover's Mill and will aid in the evacuation of homes within the range of military operations. Thank you.
You have just been listening to General Montgomery Smith, commanding the state militia at Trenton. In the meantime, further details of the catastrophe at Grover's Mill are coming in. The strange creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back into their pit and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of firemen to recover the bodies and extinguish the fire. Combined fire departments of Mercer County are fighting the flames which menace the entire countryside. We have been unable to establish any contact with our mobile unit at Grover's Mill, but we hope to be able to return you there at the earliest possible moment. In the meantime, we take you... Just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been informed that we have finally established communication with an eyewitness of the tragedy. Professor Peason has been located at a farmhouse near Grover's Mill, where he has established an emergency observation post. As a scientist, he will give you his explanation of the calamity. The next voice you hear will be that of Professor Peason, brought to you by direct wire. Professor Peason.
Of the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Grover's Mill, I can give you no authoritative information, either as to their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth. Of their destructive instrument, I might venture some conjectural explanation. For want of a better term, I shall refer to the mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own. It is my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That is my conjecture of the origin of the heat ray.
Thank you, Professor Peason. Ladies and gentlemen, here is a bulletin from Trenton. Here's a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Carl Phillips has been identified in a Trenton hospital. Now, here's another bulletin from Washington, D.C. Office of the Director of the National Red Cross reports 10 units of Red Cross emergency workers have been assigned to the headquarters of the state militia stationed outside Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Here's a bulletin from State Police, Princeton Junction. The fires at Grover's Mill and vicinity are now under control. Scouts report all quiet in the pit, no sign of life appearing from the mouth of the cylinder. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special statement from Mr. Harry McDonald, Vice President in charge of operations.
We have received a request from the militia at Trenton to place at their disposal our entire broadcasting facilities. In view of the gravity of the situation, and believing that radio has a responsibility to serve in the public interest at all times, we are turning over our facilities to the state militia at Trenton.
We take you now to the field headquarters of the state militia near Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
This is Captain Lansing of the Signal Corps, attached to the state militia now engaged in military operations in the vicinity of Grover's Mill. Situation arising from the reported presence of certain individuals of unidentified nature is now under complete control. The cylindrical object, which lies in a pit directly below our position, is surrounded on all sides by 8 battalions of infantry, without heavy field pieces, but adequately armed with rifles and machine guns. All cause for alarm, if such cause ever existed, is now entirely unjustified. The things, whatever they are, do not even venture to poke their heads above the pit. I can see their hiding place plainly in the glare of the searchlights here. With all their reported resources, these creatures can scarcely stand up against heavy machine gun fire. Anyway, it's an interesting outing for the troops. I can make out their khaki uniforms, crossing back and forth in front of the lights. It looks almost like a real war. There appears to be some slight smoke in the woods bordering the Millstone River, probably started by campers. Well, we ought to see some action soon. One of the companies is deploying on the left flank. A quick thrust and it will all be over. Now, wait a minute. I see something on top of the cylinder. No, it's nothing but a shadow. Now the troops are on the edge of the Wilmoth farm. 7,000 armed men closing in on an old metal tube. Wait. That wasn't a shadow. It's something moving. Solid metal. Kind of a shield-like affair rising up out of the cylinder. It's going higher and higher. Why, it's standing on legs. Actually rearing up on a sort of metal framework. Now it's reaching above the trees, and the searchlights are on it. Hold on.
Gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which took place tonight at Grover's Mill has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by an army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. 120 known survivors. The rest strewn over the battle area from Grover's Mill to Plainsboro, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster, or burned to cinders by its heat ray. The monster is now in control of the middle section of New Jersey and has effectively cut the state through its center. Communications lines are down from Pennsylvania to the Atlantic Ocean. Railroad tracks are torn and service from New York to Philadelphia discontinued, except routing some of the trains through Allentown and Phoenixville. Highways to the north, south, and west are clogged with frantic human traffic. Police and Army reserves are unable to control the mad flight. By morning, the fugitives will have swelled Philadelphia, Camden, and Trenton. It is estimated to twice the normal population. At this time, martial law prevails throughout New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. We take you now to Washington for a special broadcast on the national emergency. The Secretary of the Interior.
Citizens of the nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country, nor the concern of your government in protecting the lives and property of its people. However, I wish to impress upon you, private citizens and public officials, all of you, the urgent need of calm and resourceful action. Fortunately, this formidable enemy is still confined to a comparatively small area, and we may place our faith in the military forces to keep them there. In the meantime, placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us, so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united, courageous, and consecrated to the preservation of human supremacy on this earth. I thank you.
Mr. Secretary, Charlie Bueller from the Daily News. Mr. Secretary.
You've just heard the Secretary of the Interior speaking from Washington. Bulletins, too numerous to read, are piling up in the studio here. We are informed the central portion of New Jersey is blacked out from radio communication due to the effect of the heat ray upon power lines and electrical equipment. Here is a special bulletin from New York. Cables received from English, French, German scientific bodies offering assistance. Astronomers report continued gas outburst at regular intervals on planet Mars. Majority voice opinion that enemy will be reinforced by additional rocket machines. Attempts made to locate Professor Peason of Princeton, who has observed Martians at close range. It is feared he was lost in recent battle. Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report 3 Martian machines visible above treetops, moving north towards Somerville with population fleeing ahead of them. Heat ray not in use, although advancing at express train speed, invaders pick their way carefully. They seem to be making conscious effort to avoid destruction of cities and countryside. However, they stop to uproot power lines, bridges, and railroad tracks. Their apparent objective is to crush resistance, paralyze communication, and disorganize human society. Here's a bulletin from Basking Ridge, New Jersey. Coon hunters have stumbled upon a second cylinder similar to the first, embedded in the Great Swamp 20 miles south of Morristown. Army field pieces are proceeding from Newark to blow up second invading unit before cylinder can be opened and the fighting machine rigged. They are taking a position in the foothills of Watchung Mountains. Another bulletin from Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report enemy machines, now 3 in number, increasing speed northward, kicking over houses and trees in their evident haste to form a conjunction with their allies south of Morristown. Machines also sighted by telephone operator east of Middlesex, within 10 miles of Plainfield. Here's a bulletin from Winstonfield, Long Island. Fleet of Army bombers carrying heavy explosives flying north in pursuit of enemy. Scouting planes act as guides. They keep speeding enemy in sight. Just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we've run special wires to the artillery line in adjacent villages to give you direct reports in the zone of the advancing enemy. First, we take you to the battery of the 22nd Field Artillery, located in the Watchung Mountains.
Range, 32 meters.
32 meters.
Projection, 39 degrees.
39 degrees.
Fire.
We're 140 yards to the right, sir.
Ship range, 31 meters.
31 meters.
Projection, 37 degrees.
37 degrees.
Fire.
A hit, sir. We got the tripod of one of them. They've stopped. The others are trying to repair it.
Quick, get the range. Shift 30 meters.
30 meters.
Projection, 27 degrees.
27 degrees.
Fire.
Can't see the shell land, sir. They're letting off a smoke.
What is it?
A black smoke, sir. Moving this way, lying close to the ground. It's moving fast.
Put on gas masks. Get ready to fire. Shift 24 meters.
24 meters.
Projection, 24 degrees.
24 degrees.
Fire!
Still can't see, sir. Smoke's coming near. Get the range. 23 meters. 23 meters. 23 meters. Projection, 22 degrees. 22 degrees.
Army bombing plane, Victor, 843 off Bayonne, New Jersey. Lieutenant Boat, commanding 8 bombers. Reporting to Commander Fairfax, Langham Field. This is Boat, reporting to Commander Fairfax, Langham Field. Enemy tripod machines now in sight. Reinforced by 3 machines from Morristown Cylinder. 6 altogether. 1 machine already crippled, believed hit by shell from Army gun in Watchung Mountains. Guns now appear silent. A heavy black fog hanging close to the earth, of extreme density, nature unknown. No sign of heat ray. Enemy now turns east, crossing Passaic River into the Jersey marshes. Another straddles the Pulaski Skyway. Evident objective is New York City. They're pushing down a high-tension power station. The machines are close together now and we're ready to attack. Plane circling, ready to strike. 1,000 yards and we'll be over the first. 800 yards. 600. 400. 200. There they go. The giant arm raised. Green flash. They're spraying us with flame. 2,000 feet. Engines are giving out. No chance to release bombs. Only one thing left. Drop on them, plane and all. We're down on the first one. Now the engine's gone. 8.
This is Bayonne, New Jersey, calling Langham Field. This is Bayonne, New Jersey, calling Langham Field. Come in, please.
This is Langham Field. Go ahead.
8 Army bombers in engagement with enemy tripod machines over Jersey Flats. Engines incapacitated by heat ray. All crashed. 1 enemy machine destroyed. Enemy now discharging heavy black smoke in direction of...
New York, New Jersey. This is New York, New Jersey. Warning. Poisonous black smoke pouring in from Jersey marshes. Reaches South Street. Gas mask useless. Urge population to move into open spaces. Automobiles use Route 7, 23, 24. Avoid congested area. Smoke now spreading over Raymond Boulevard.
2X2L. Calling CQ. 2X2L. Calling CQ. 2X2L. Calling 8X3R. Come in, please.
This is 8X3R. Coming back at 2X2L.
How's reception? How's reception? Okay, please. Where are you, 8X3R? What's the matter? Where are you?
I'm speaking from the roof of the broadcast building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as the Martians approach. Estimated in last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. Hutchinson River Parkway still kept open for motor traffic. Avoid bridges to Long Island, hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey's shore closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our army wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here to the end. People are holding service below us in the cathedral. Now I look down the harbor. All manner of boats, overloaded with fleeing population pulling out from docks. Streets all jammed. Noise and crowds like New Year's Eve in city. Wait a minute. Enemy now in sight above the Palisades. Five great machines. First one is crossing the river. I can see it from here, wading the Hudson like a man wading through a brook. Bulletins handed me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside Buffalo, one in Chicago, St. Louis. Seem to be timed and spaced. Now the first machine reaches the shore. He stands watching, looking over the city. His steel, cowlish head is even with the skyscrapers. He waits for the others. They rise like a line of new towers on the city's west side. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out. Black smoke drifting over the city. People in the streets see it now. They're running towards the East River. Thousands of them. Dropping in like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached Times Square. People trying to run away from it, but it's no use. Falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue. 5th Avenue. 100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
X2L calling CQ. New York. Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone? 2X2L.
You are listening to a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights presentation of Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in an original dramatization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. The performance will continue after a brief intermission. This is Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.
As I set down these notes on paper, I'm obsessed by the thought that I may be the last living man on Earth. I have been hiding in this empty house near Grover's Mill, a small island of daylight cut off by the black smoke from the rest of the world. All that happened before the arrival of these monstrous creatures in the world now seems part of another life. A life that has no continuity with the present furtive existence of the lonely derelict who pencils these words on the back of some astronomical notes bearing the signature of Richard Peason. I look down at my blackened hands, my torn shoes, my tattered clothes, and I try to connect them with a professor who lives at Princeton and who, on the night of October 30th, glimpsed through his telescope an orange splash of light on a distant planet. My wife, my colleagues, my students, my books, my observatory, my world. Where are they? Did they ever exist? Am I Richard Peason? What day is it? Do days exist without calendars? Does time pass when there are no human hands left to wind the clocks? In writing down my daily life, I tell myself, I shall preserve human history between the dark covers of this little book that was meant to record the movements of the stars. But to write, I must live, and to live, I must eat. I find moldy bread in the kitchen, and an orange not too spoiled to swallow. I keep watch at the window. From time to time, I catch sight of a Martian above the black smoke. The smoke still holds the house in its black coil, but at length there is a hissing sound, and suddenly I see a Martian mounted on his machine, spraying the air with a jet of steam, as if to dissipate the smoke. I watch in a corner as his huge metal legs nearly brush against the house. Exhausted by terror, I fall asleep. It's morning. Morning. Sun streams in the window. The black cloud of gas is lifted, and the scorched meadows to the north look as though a black snowstorm has passed over them. I venture from the house. I make my way to a road. No traffic. Here and there, a wrecked car, baggage overturned, a blackened skeleton. I push on north. For some reason, I feel safer trailing these monsters than running away from them. And I keep a careful watch. I have seen the Martians feed. Should one of their machines appear over the top of the trees, I am ready to fling myself flat on the earth. I come to a chestnut tree. October chestnuts are ripe. I fill my pockets. I must keep alive. 2 days I wander in a vague, northerly direction through a desolate world. Finally, I notice a living creature, a small red squirrel in a beech tree. I stare at him and wonder. He stares back at me. I believe at that moment the animal and I shared the same emotion, the joy of finding another living being. I push on north. I find dead cows in a brackish field. Beyond, the charred ruins of a dairy. The silo remains standing guard over the wasteland like a lighthouse deserted by the sea. Astride the silo perches a weathercock. The arrow points north. Next day I came to a city, vaguely familiar in its contours, yet its buildings strangely dwarfed and leveled off, as if a giant had sliced off its highest towers with a capricious sweep of his hand. I reached the outskirts. I found Newark, undemolished but humbled by some whim of the advancing Martians. Presently, with an odd feeling of being watched, I caught sight of something crouching in a doorway. I made a step towards it, and it rose up and became a man armed with a large knife.
Stop. Where'd you come from?
I come from many places. A long time ago from Princeton.
Princeton, huh? That's near Grover's Mill?
Yes.
Grover's Mill. There's no food here. This is my country. All this end of town, down to the river. There's only food for one. Which way are you going?
I don't know. I guess I'm looking for people.
What's that? Did you hear something just then?
Only a bird. A live bird.
You get to know that birds have shadows these days. Say, we're in Elvin here. Let's crawl into this doorway and talk.
Have you seen any Martians?
Nah. They've gone over to New York. At night, the sky is alive with their lights. Just as if people were still living in it. By daylight, you can't see them. 5 days ago, a couple of them carried something big across the flats from the airport. I believe they're learning how to fly.
Fly?
Yeah, fly.
Then it's all over with humanity. Stranger, there's still you and I. 2 of us left.
They got themselves in solid. They wrecked the greatest country in the world. Those green stars, they're probably falling somewhere every night. We've only lost one machine. There isn't anything to do. We're done. We're licked.
Where were you? You're in the uniform.
Yeah, what's left of it. I was in the militia, National Guard. That's good. Wasn't any war any more than there's war between men and ants.
And we're eatable ants. I found that out. What will they do with us?
I've thought it all out. Right now we're caught as we're wanted. The Martians only has to go a few miles to get a crowd in the run. But they won't keep doing that. They'll begin catching us systematically, keeping the best and storing us in cages and things. They haven't begun on us yet.
Not begun?
Not begun. All this happened so far is because we don't have sense enough to keep quiet, bothering them with guns and such stuff and losing our heads and rushing off in crowds. Now, instead of our rushing around blind, we've got to fix ourselves up. Fix ourselves up according to the way things are now. Cities, nations, civilization, progress. Done.
But if that's so, what is there to live for?
Well, there won't be any more concerts for 1 million years or so, and no nice little dinners at restaurants. If it's amusement you're after, I guess the game's up.
And what is there left?
Life. That's what. I want to live. Yeah, and so do you. We're not going to be exterminated, and I don't mean to be caught either, and tamed, and fattened and bred like an ox.
What are you going to do?
I'm going on. Right under their feet. I got a plan. We men as men are finished. We don't know enough. We got to learn plenty before we've got a chance. And we've got to live and keep free while we learn, see? I thought it all out, see?
Tell me the rest.
Well, it isn't all of us that were made for wild beasts, and that's what it's got to be. That's why I watched you. All these little office workers that used to live in these houses, they'd be no good. They haven't any stuff to them. They just used to run off to work. I've seen hundreds of them running wild to catch their commuter train in the morning for fear they'd get canned if they didn't. Running back at night, afraid they won't be in time for dinner. Lives insured and a little invested in case of accidents. And on Sundays, worried about the hereafter. The Martians will be a godsend for those guys. Nice roomy cages, good food, careful breeding, no worries. After a week or so, chasing about the fields on empty stomachs, they'll come and be glad to be caught.
You've thought it all out, haven't you?
You bet I have. That isn't all. These Martians will make pets of some of them, train them to do tricks. Who knows? Get sentimental over the pet boy who grew up and had to be killed. And some, maybe, they'll train to hunt us.
No, that's impossible. No human being.
Yes, they will. There's men who'll do it gladly. If one of them ever comes after me, why...
In the meantime, you and I and others like us, where are we to live when the Martians own the Earth?
I've got it all figured out. We'll live underground. I've been thinking about the sewers. Under New York are miles and miles of them. The main ones are big enough for anybody. Then there's cellars, vaults, underground storerooms, railway tunnels, subways. You begin to see, eh? And we'll get a bunch of strong men together, no weak ones. That rubbish, out.
And you meant me to go?
Well, I gave you a chance, didn't I?
We won't quarrel about that. Go on.
And we've got to make safe places for us to stay in, see? And get all the books we can. Science books. That's where men like you come in, see? We'll raid the museums. We'll even spy on the Martians. It may not be so much we have to learn before. Well, just imagine this. 4 or 5 of their own fighting machines suddenly start off. Heat rays, right and left, and not a Martian in them. Not a Martian in them, but men. Men who've learned the way how. It may even be in our time. Gee. Imagine having one of them lovely things with its heat ray wide and free. We'd turn it on the Martians. We'd turn it on men. We'd bring everybody down to their knees.
That's your plan?
You and me, and a few more of us. We'd own the world.
I see.
Say, what's the matter? Where are you going?
Not to your world. Goodbye, stranger. After parting with the artilleryman, I came at last to the Holland Tunnel. I entered that silent tube, anxious to know the fate of the great city on the other side of the Hudson. Cautiously, I came out of the tunnel and made my way up Canal Street. I reached 14th Street, and there again were black powder and several bodies, and an evil, ominous smell from the gratings of the cellars of some of the houses. I wandered up through the 30s and 40s. I stood alone on Times Square. I caught sight of a lean dog running down 7th Avenue with a piece of dark brown meat in his jaws, and a pack of starving mongrels at his heels. He made a wide circle around me as though he feared I might prove a fresh competitor. I walked up Broadway in the direction of that strange powder, past silent shop windows displaying their mute wares to empty sidewalks, past the Capitol Theater, silent, dark, past a shooting gallery where a row of empty guns faced an arrested line of wooden ducks. Near Columbus Circle, I noticed models of 1939 motor cars in the showrooms facing empty streets. From over the top of the General Motors building, I watched a flock of black birds circling in the sky. I hurried on. Suddenly I caught sight of the hood of a Martian machine standing somewhere in Central Park, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. An insane idea, I rushed recklessly across Columbus Circle and into the park. I climbed a small hill above the pond at 60th Street. From there I could see, standing in a silent row along the mall, 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their great steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. I looked in vain for the monsters that inhabit those machines. Suddenly, my eyes were attracted to an immense flock of black birds that hovered directly below me. They circled to the ground, and there before my eyes, stark and silent, lay the Martians, with the hungry birds pecking and tearing brown shreds of flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when their bodies were examined in the laboratories, it was found that they were killed by the putrefactive and disease bacteria against which their systems were unprepared. Slain after all man's defenses had failed by the humblest thing that God in his wisdom put upon this earth. Before the cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that through all the deep of space, no life existed beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now we see further. Dim and wonderful is the vision I have conjured up in my mind of life spreading slowly from this little seedbed of the solar system throughout the inanimate vastness of sidereal space, but that is a remote dream. It may be that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve. To them, and not to us, is the future ordained, perhaps. Strange it now seems to sit in my peaceful study at Princeton, writing down this last chapter of the record begun at a deserted farm in Grover's Mill. Strange to see from my window the university spires, dim and blue through an April haze. Strange to watch children playing in the streets. Strange to see young people strolling on the green, where the new spring grass heals the last black scars of a bruised earth. Strange to watch the sightseers enter the museum where the disassembled parts of a Martian machine are kept on public view. Strange when I recall the time when I first saw it, bright and clean-cut, hard and silent, under the dawn of that last great day.
This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. Chilling Tales for Dark Knight's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of a bush and saying, boo. Starting now, we couldn't stove all of your windows and steal all your garden gates by tomorrow night, so we did the best next thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed our production facilities. You will be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it, and that both institutions are still open for business. So goodbye, everybody, and remember the terrible lesson you learned tonight. That green, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch, and if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween.
You'd never know it existed, looking at the house from the outside. Poking around inside would only cement your disbelief. But it's there. Somehow. Although the footprint of the house doesn't seem to allow for it, it's there. Tucked away in a feat of architectural genius. We first discovered it just before my baby brother was born. Dad got it into his head that we needed more space. He wanted to move his study, which occupied a small room at the end of the second-floor hallway, downstairs to make room for my baby brother's nursery. He was shocked, to say the least, when instead of bursting into the sunlit side yard, the north wall of the living room fell away to reveal another room. The secret chamber, sealed up for who knows how long, was perfectly empty, save for a generous coating of dust. A closed door stood in the opposite wall, and it was lit by a single window. Everything from the ceiling to the hardwood floor was painted white. The discovery seemed to do a number on Dad's nerves. He was very much a man is king of his castle sort of guy, and it bothered him deeply to not know every inch of his home. The window and door especially had him perturbed. The window, as best as we could figure, couldn't be seen from the outside. The door was the worst, however. It hinted at further unknown depths to the house that we'd never before suspected. As a young, excited little boy, it was only Dad's unease that held my exploratory urges in check. I remember him staring at that door, the gears of his mind almost audible as they churned through all the possible explanations. The construction work was put on hold as he tackled the mystery, darting in and out of the house, taking measurements and studying angles. At last, he finally let us in on his calculations. Well, I don't know. It adds up, sort of. Not really. That doesn't make any sense, commented Mom. Her brow furrowed as she tried to interpret his clueless conclusion. Dad seemed not to hear. He stepped cautiously into the white room and bent over the windowsill. Something's off, he grunted. I shouldn't be able to see the neighbor's garage from here. Mom made a vague suggestion about funny angles, which Dad seemed to swallow for the time being, as his eyes flew furtively toward the closed door in the far wall. Even the doorknob was white. How far does it go? I fell asleep that night with his questions cycling through my head. To find one hidden room was exciting enough, but possibility that there were more. That door promised adventure, and it was an offer my boyish heart couldn't resist. I got up early the next morning and ran downstairs, eager to get a peek into the secret room before breakfast, before Dad's construction crew showed up to start working. Making straight for the closed door, I wrapped my fingers around the knob. It was made of wood, and paused. I remembered briefly seeing my dad's unease, but with the sunlight from the window warming my back, it seemed silly. The wooden ball turned easily in my grip, and with only the softest squeak, the door opened. I found myself in another room, nearly identical to the last one. Everything was white. There was another door directly opposite to the one I stood in, and a window warmed the entire scene, but this time from the other direction. 2 secret rooms, and maybe even a third. My home had become a fairy tale castle in my mind, a pirate fortress of fantastical realm. Every boy dreamed of such places, filled with hidden passages just waiting to be explored. I was the lucky one whose dream came true. The second door opened, just as I'd guessed, on a third, then a fourth, a fifth. It didn't occur to me that it made no sense that from the outside I should have been well into the neighbor's yard by now. I only knew the thrill of discovery at this point. What would I find at the end? Treasures forgotten by the years? Waiting for my stubby little fingers to polish off the dust? It was in the 6th room that I had paused and glanced over my shoulder. I could see the distant living room, normal and boring, and I thought it looked very homey. A noise signaled the beginning of breakfast. The scent of eggs made its lazy way down the chain of empty rooms after me. Mom would call me back soon. Part of me was anxious to hear her voice. Why? The scent of adventure was strong in my nostrils, stronger than the feeble aroma of eggs sizzling several worlds away. I could have eggs anytime. Why should I abandon my expedition for something so mundane as breakfast? Yet, as I turned to face the next white door, my heart remained looking back to that familiar living room. Why this door? It looked exactly the same as the 5 that came before it. Why did it alone seem to dampen my adventurous spirit? Just one more, I thought. Then I'll go back. The 7th room was the same, but different. So very different. There was no window, no door from the far side. Instead, a rickety dresser leaned precariously against one wall, and a messily made bed occupied one corner. Every space in between was stuffed with either blankets or, and it was quite a shock to see, so many in all one place, dolls. Some were plush, with button eyes and seams spilling guts of clouds. Others were made of harder stuff, ceramic with eyes of sparkling glass. The air in the last room was stuffy, likely because it was a dead end without even a window for ventilation. I admit, I was disappointed. I expected to find something more exciting than a few old pieces of furniture and a chaotic collection of toys and laundry. Still, I took a moment to look around. Maybe in that dark slit between the bed and the floorboards, something was hidden. I was on my knees, crawling forward through the dust, when it happened. A distant bang, then another, louder. Bang, 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 bang. Frightened, I spun around in time to see the last of the door slam shut, plunging me into darkness. You may be surprised to know I didn't scream. I think I was too shocked. After a moment of utter blindness, light from the previous room's window managed to work its way under the door. My eyes adjusted. I could see well enough to regain my feet, well enough to catch my tiny reflection in the doll's eyes, well enough to notice something swelling on the bed. It was like something was inflating beneath the blankets, rising up through the dust-impregnated mattress. The wonder was gone. All thoughts of treasure and adventure evaporated as I scrambled back from the bed, fumbling for the doorknob as I watched the heavy sheets fall away from the materializing form. I clenched my eyes shut as the door opened, letting in the sunlight. I turned my back and ran, slamming the door shut again behind me. I didn't care what secrets that seventh chamber held anymore. I didn't care about anything except the numbers as I reopened the rooms and shut them up again, counting down as I went. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I screeched to a halt. I should have been back in my living room. My nose should have been full of the smell of scrambled eggs. I should have heard Mom's voice calling me to the table. Instead, I faced another door, just like the last. Maybe I counted wrong. The door opened. Another white room. And another after that. I stood panting in terror as I puzzled over my dilemma. 8 rooms behind me, I heard doors opening and closing, each sequence louder than the last. It's coming. With no other alternative, I opened the next door and kept running. The chain of chambers went on and on. I lost count, certain only that there were far more than there had been on my way in. They just went on and on without an end, each one exactly the same. My tiny legs grew tired, and finally, I stumbled and fell, scraping my knee against the rough wood floor. I began to whimper as I listened to my pursuer's progress, marked by the steady rhythm of creak, bangs, and creaks and bangs. I was trapped in an impossible labyrinth, hunted by something that had been waiting untold years for a curious little boy to come exploring. A sob escaped me as the bangs got closer. I couldn't run anymore. It was going to get me. The doorknob behind me rattled, began to turn. I spun my face to the agent of my doom. And as the door cracked open, I screamed the only thing I could think of, the only name that could bring comfort to a frightened child. I cried out for my mom at the top of my lungs. "What is it?" I turned back in the direction of my hopeless flight, back towards what I knew had been just another in the endless line of sinister doors, which now was the rectangular hole Dad and his crew had knocked in the living room wall. Mom was standing there, her face riddled with concern. I burst into tears. Dad's project didn't make it very far. His crew ended up patching the hole, once more sealing away the 7 or more than 7 secret rooms. He and Mom agreed to just let the baby share their room until he got older. Then he'd move in with me. I told them what I'd seen, but I know they didn't believe me. I think the reason for the project's cancellation had more to do with Mom not wanting her living room trashed by the construction crew Dad said she should have mentioned that before they started, but in the end, he caved. I hated the living room after that, and I always clung to the south wall whenever I had to pass through. But sometimes, late at night, while I tried to sleep, I thought I heard the sound of doors slamming.
Genetics aren't very kind. They either go all into your brain or all into your body. The latest Facebook quiz told me I'm the reincarnation of Stephen Hawking. I could have told you that. Why else would I have gotten beaten up so much in high school? Which by default means there weren't any leftovers to give me good looks. I look like a walrus had a rape baby with a butternut squash. The squash named me John Linsaka. I'm 35 years old, I'm 5'8", nearly as wide, and my hair sits atop my head like a block of mousy ramen. My glasses are square and thick. I generally pull off an appearance that says, he must do something off to the side. And you know what? That's right, I do. I make films. And let me just say that Windows Movie Maker is a sorely, sorely underrated tool for producing films. No, Microsoft isn't paying me to say this. It's free, and some of those transition effects are just as sweet as it gets. And it does what any other video editing software does. Crafts a message. To me, a film is just a message. It's the next evolution of the pop-up book. Okay, Johnny boy, here's your book about the 3 little pigs, and oh, the houses pop up! Whoa! How totally unrelated to the message of the story. But it's gotten your attention. When the message actually does come along, you won't know it hit you, and you'll take in the whole thing. I landed a pretty hot girlfriend for a man my age. I sold her on my filmmaker status. She stuck with me after she found out that I wasn't a successful filmmaker. She just started hitting me a lot. So about my films. The haters want to call them slideshows, but a bona fide slideshow has no substance. Remember, I have a message in my films. I can give you an idea what they're about just by the titles. Don't worry, no spoilers here. The Crop Circles of North Dakota. Super Secret Code, the Illuminati, and the fortune cookie industry. What UFOs tell us by the colors of their lights. How to copulate with the ghosts of royalty throughout history. I know what you're thinking. A daring, innovative content that probes the most tender places in the panties of the truth. And that's what you should be thinking. You can't just close your eyes to the secrets of the universe. Reality is a lifelong experience, so know it, own it, find out what makes it tick. When it comes to the truth, I'm like a treasure hunter in the desert. I don't stop digging when I find the treasure chest. No! I set it aside and I keep going, you know? Like, how much deeper does this go before I hit bedrock and there's nothing else? So my films try to get to that bedrock of truth. My shovels may be shaped funny and the holes I dig with them may go at funny angles, but that's what it takes. You might be wondering, so John, if you're this rock star filmmaker, then what are you doing for cash flow in the meantime? I'm an assistant manager at Burger Burglar. It fits in with my films in a cruel way. Remember how I said that I live for finding the undiluted truth? Well, you get part of it working in fast food. That's where you really get to see the truth about people. There's something about fast food that makes people forget who they are, and it reduces them to their basest and most primordial brain functions. They're so caught up in the throes of being on the verge of gratification that they can't communicate worth a pickled piss. Which burger combo again, sir?
That one.
Sir, which one are you pointing at?
That one.
Which combo number is it?
The one with the brown chicken, not the orange.
What dessert were you wanting?
Blue, please.
I want blue. So yeah, I prefer my film projects to my day job. My third job was staying sane long enough to have enough left in me to do my films any justice. I started seeing all sorts of little telltale signs that I was coming unhinged. You can be the bigger man, but many a big thing has been taken down by smaller things. Viruses take down humans, termites take down houses, stupid people reduce intelligent people to breakdowns. If you don't understand public shooters, work in fast food. Holy Jesus and mustard, the customers want one of everything on the menu for free if you get one detail of their order wrong. The kids these places hire aren't much smarter than the cows that went into the meat grinder with their eyes wide open. Things came to a head one weekend in July, when the heat was intense and Shannon wanted me to put the AC unit in one of the windows. My apartment is on the 10th floor of the biggest corpse cock of an apartment building. One of those places that still have those old-timey radiators. The windows aren't what they quite used to be back in 1912. I had all of them open so the place could breathe, and I was trying to get Shannon's obscenely bulky and retro AC into the most stable window. Note that I didn't say stable, just most stable. I think a hairlip baby gets a better grip on a titty than this window's got a grip on that damn AC. All the while I'm doing this, Shannon is standing over me the way a child does over an anthill with a magnifying glass, letting me know just how hot it is in the apartment, and that I've waited to do this at the last minute when the place feels like the interior of the devil's thorny anus. And it's all another certified paper in the stack of evidence that I don't really love her. I didn't quite agree with her. As soon as the window had a feather's grip on the AC, I stood face to face with Shannon and artfully conveyed my own thoughts. Her orange fluffy cat had gone out one of the windows to walk the crumbling decorative bricks that jutted from the wall. He must have seen the AC as the roomiest perch because that's where he jumped. You know those stories about cats that fell from great heights and survived without a hitch? This isn't one of those stories. An old crazy cat lady was on the sidewalk below in time to catch the spray of stuff with orange fur attached to it. One of the paws bounced and went down her cleavage like a lucky rabbit's foot without a chain. So, in my periphery, I heard splat, and then gah! Then the AC slipped out. The aftermath determined that the lady wasn't paying attention. Just like that, my girlfriend's cat died one minute, and I don't know how many more cats were orphaned the next. I wasn't at all surprised when night fell and I received an inebriated video from Shannon. She was unclad and looked into her phone and told me that she had a real slide show for me. Some guy I didn't recognize was behind her and he unzipped his pants. I couldn't keep watching. I checked my YouTube channel. No new views. Not for 3 weeks. I needed something to help me cope with the simple act of existing. For once, Shannon might have given me the right idea. Alcohol. Nah, I just bawled my ever-loving eyes out after the Merlot bottle was empty. I stalked a co-worker's Facebook, Rebecca. She was everything Shannon wasn't. Kind, sweet, 19, under 200 pounds. Somewhere between blacking out and sleeping off a hangover, I decided it was time for a better coping strategy. Meditation seemed like a logical choice. It masquerades under the term mindfulness in mainstream magazines. But meditation carries a bit more mysticism, and rightfully so. I wasn't trying to reach enlightenment, I just wanted to salvage my sanity. Meditation is supposed to be like a psychic reboot, changing the software of my mind's operating system. So what did I have to lose? If only I knew. I didn't expect much. I was breaking too many of the established rules of meditation. I'm shaped like a gumdrop, so there's no way I was going to sit cross-legged on the floor. Not without coming out of a trance to find my legs atrophied and fell off. I sat in my old lazy chair, which looked like a mummy with how much duct tape was holding it together. That was enough mysticism for me right there. The lazy boy Pharaoh. The first session was okay, I guess. I just wasn't sure if I was doing it right. The guided recording told me to see my thoughts as bubbles that left my head and floated away, as if they were something separate from me as a whole. A different notion for me at the time, since, well, if your thoughts aren't you, then what is? By the second session, I was getting the hang of it. My concerns and anxieties and worries and OCD issues were floating away as soon as they were in my mind's eye. And I was finding things I'd forgotten about, if I had even known them to begin with. Quiet. Peace. This emptiness of mind filled the absence left by Shannon. It was very enjoyable. On my worst of days, I could still find some stillness. Like a glassy pond on a cloudy day. Sure, things were gloomy, but there wasn't even a single ripple. So, it was the same with me right after meditating. I became addicted, looking to meditate more often. I spent my breaks at work meditating. I usually scratched out ideas for a film on the back of my receipt, or worried myself in circles over various issues. Not anymore. I felt my inspiration returning. I was getting ideas for films faster than I could write them down. I also started making new connections in the material of past films. I revisited some of my notes on one of the oldest pyramids. I had made it a point to collect as much material as possible on the occurrences that were chalked up to supernatural phenomena, sights, sounds, freak accidents, and so forth. I mapped out where they took place on a blown-up aerial photograph of the pyramid, top down. Where the incidents are plotted on the photo, it looks like a constellation. I then realized that it wasn't celestial. It was mathematical, geometric. It was a shape that fit into everything I've read about sacred geometry. But where? Several hours on Google turned up many shapes and configurations that came close, but didn't quite match. The stress and fatigue that I had been feeling raised off my shoulders a few inches. The walls that were closing in on my filmmaking suddenly turned into doors. I was onto something. Meditation didn't just relax my mind. It changed the way I process things. One session of meditation, things changed permanently. I started the same way as always. Breathe in, count to 10, breathe out, count to 10. By then, I didn't even consciously count. I had no thoughts, just the sensation of air entering and leaving. My breath soon became the gentle roar of distant waves. Whoosh, crashing ashore, whoosh, drawing back. I opened my eyes to find myself in my chair. Except I wasn't in my living room. I was on a cliff. An outcropping of rock that plunged down into a vast ocean. The waves endlessly making noise against the stone surface. Crash! Forth, whoosh, back. I allowed room for one conscious thought. I wanted to be somewhere where I felt comfortable, at home, fulfilling, comforting. My head swam and I felt the impulse to shoot out an arm and steady myself. But how was I going to fall? I was in my chair, laid back. But that falling sensation came and I opened my eyes. I saw that I was staring up at a ceiling I didn't recognize. I put my arms out to push myself up. I couldn't feel the floor. I raised my head, touching my chin to my chest. I did this just in time to see Rebecca come out of a room at the far end of a hallway. Music poured out of that room along with steam. She had a towel around her waist, but her breasts were free and everything from the waist up was alive with movement in time to the music. I was lying right in the middle of the hallway, and she was going to come right to me. I panicked. Somehow I couldn't move. I waited for the scream. It never happened. She walked right over me. I saw her beauty sail directly overhead. After that shock was over, I realized that she didn't collide with me. Her feet touched the floor right through my body. I looked up at the opposite end of the hall and got an upside-down view of the most beautiful ass in the world. Her towel was hitched together above her tailbone and stretched open. Her hair whipped side to side with the rhythm. I was terrified and electrified. I flailed about until my body slowly floated up and righted itself. I felt like I was swimming. I stood up facing the bathroom door. If I didn't focus, my movements didn't register in the outside world. I could flail for all I was worth and not move an inch. She ran through me from behind, apparently forgetting something in the bathroom. She was completely nude and trotting. No time to keep a towel, I guess. I was captivated by that lily-white skin, broken up by a few dark freckles on her shoulders and 2 really dark ones on her neck. She grabbed something and went back to wherever she came from, right through me again. I hoped she would do this several more times, but she must not have forgotten anything else. I began moving around, swimming clumsily through the hall. After I saw some pictures and saw the overall well-worn look of the hall, it hit me. I was in Rebecca's house. As soon as I had this thought, a woman that must have been her mom passed through the hall. I couldn't have felt more exposed. Was this a dream? Or was this perhaps astral projection? My fears were starting to subside, and my boldness was starting to outweigh my guilt. I tried to pivot. I could. I faced the only door at the other end of the hallway. I tried to swim forward. I did. I passed through the door, and I was in a room that couldn't have belonged to anyone else but Rebecca. She was lying on her bed, on her stomach, still naked, looking at her phone. I felt so dirty, but I felt so... Never mind. I didn't feel it for long. I heard someone clear their throat, and I turned to see a skeleton in a slate gray suit and tie with a white shirt. Well, I thought he was a skeleton, but when he brought up his hands to drag on a cigarette, I realized that he was tattooed from head to toe in bones. I could see the meat of his hands. The detail of the skull on his face was chillingly fascinating. It wasn't a pretty sight, and the heavy reflective shades hid what I thought could have been empty eye sockets. I wondered if he was Rebecca's father. He was throwing her a very stern stare. It slowly crept into my mind that he wasn't looking at her, but at me. Nah, he couldn't be.
Yes, I can see you,
he said. And then I felt everything that was probably ever felt by creepy men bagged by the likes of Chris Hansen.
You probably shouldn't be ogling her like that. You're old enough to be her father,
he stated flatly. I nearly jumped out of my skin at being addressed so directly. Who are you? I demanded, suddenly feeling defensive of Rebecca. Never mind the fact that I was just drooling over her in her own room. He flicked his cigarette and a spew of embers spiraled downward, where they took to the air just before hitting the ground and became glowing orange gnats. They were able to inflict my astral body with bites. I swatted at them, but they were too quick. They were able to dive in and bite and be off before my hand could flatten them. Oh, and they burned. Ah! Ouch! Oh, God!
Naughty boy,
the stranger grunted. Call off your bugs! I yelled.
Call off your films,
he returned. That's when I started to believe this was just a dream. I still wanted to put the dream to use. I was aware that I was dreaming, which made it a lucid dream, which meant that by speaking to dream characters, I would be having a dialogue with my subconscious. Still swatting at the searing gnats, I floated over to the stranger. Excuse me, sir, but this is my dream, which means you're a part of me. I'd like to know what part of me you rep... He exhaled a plume of smoke that erupted from his face like a cannonball in the shape of a screaming skull. If souls had bowels, I would have just shit myself. A spectral projectile knocked me head over heels, somersaulting outside the house. I was dismayed both from the sucker punch and from being removed from the presence of the naked Rebecca. I didn't have long to think, as shrieking smoke skulls were now circling the house like a swarm of angry hornets. Their eye sockets burned with white flames that I'm pretty sure were trained on me. Well, Fuckosaurus Rex, I said. The skulls must have been offended by the F-bomb. Each of them beelined at me. I was knocked around like a June beetle at the mercy of tennis rackets. Disoriented and blind from the chaos, I tried finding my silver cord and pulling myself along the celestial safety rope. After thinking I would never get out of the situation I was in, my silver cord suddenly retracted like a tape measure, and I was back in my apartment in my recliner. My eyes flew open at the sound of my cell ringing. I quietly thanked whoever it was at the other end of the call for yanking me out of such a horrible dream. I must have accidentally fallen asleep. Hello? Total silence. I figured that the call had dropped. Getting out of the recliner wasn't easy. My physical body felt banged up like it had been with me for that skull gangbang in my dream. I inspected myself for bruises and found none. I faced my breakfast of Pop-Tarts and coffee with a blank stare and an even more blank mind. Maybe there was such a thing as too much meditation. It was like psychic alcohol. I kept feeling good, so I kept going, and then suddenly, whoa there, killer! The emptiness that filled my mind was just enough to displace the existential crisis of the situation with my girlfriend, her cat, the air conditioner, and the flames that were rapidly spreading from the whole situation. Did the police lift my fingertips from the grubby knobs and buttons on the air unit? Did they run the contact info on the cat's collar? Or would they come asking for a motive on dropping a redonkulous air conditioner on a crazy cat lady? Would they force me to adopt all of her cats? The stress was like a parasitic snail trying to invade my shell with its pokey, rapey proboscis of panic. I reacted the way I normally do. I got to work on one of my films. I began to remember the things that I'd pieced together about the pyramids and sacred geometry. I did the lazy thing and looked for whatever stills I had of pyramids and the like. Then I looked at my music collection for anything exotic sounding enough to go with such pictures. I was piecing together my first few thoughts when the lights in my apartment began to flicker. The display of my laptop cut out for a few seconds. I thought I was looking at a glitched out screen. An orange light appeared in the corner of the screen. Was it a virus? A game? I soon realized that it was a reflection of something behind me. A cigarette. Its feeble light tracing out the frames of very reflective sunglasses. Then the screen came back on. And my project was gone. I thought that maybe it had been minimized. No, it was actually gone. All the associated files were gone too. The hell? I yelled with my hands in the air like a normal person watching his football team doing something stupid. Was I really going to have to comb through Yahoo image search again? Was I really going to have to convert YouTube videos to MP3 for background music? Again? My outrage gave me a bowel movement that must have been congealing for hours. I rushed to the water closet to free the prairie dog. I was staring through the bathroom doorway when the door, well, just sort of slammed shut. There, I saw myself in the full-length mirror behind the door, looking like a dead body with its pants around its ankles. A smoking skeleton stood behind the toilet. I may or may not have spiraled in the air and flung my fudgy cargo like it was one of those manure spreaders. Facing my toilet, there was nothing behind it but the bathroom wall. My body was heavy with fatigue and yet electric with adrenaline. That's when I decided it was time to get to work and get the insanity out of my system. I don't think I could ever remember a time when the smell of frying beef and dumb fat kids was comforting. It certainly was that day. Rebecca was the first person to make eye contact with me. Her gorgeous eyes were wide and concerned, but not because she had seen my soul peeping on her. "John!" she shouted over the din of impatient customers. "Almost everyone is called in sick. There's barely enough of us to man the kitchen and the registers both." She rapid-fired these words before "How can I help you?" to the next frowning fat ass in a long line of frowning fat asses. Ever the glorified slave, I jumped in and did a triple duty with my crew. My world became a blur of bags, babbling headsets, the sting of fryer grease, and angry fat faces itching for their next heart attack. Those are the moments in which I blank out by instinct. I was so in the flow that I didn't hear Mike in the kitchen curse and say something about the spatula disappearing. Before long, I felt like I was going to piss myself. I ran to the restroom. As per usual, the stress-induced waterfall also brought on a mudslide, so I had to sit. Then a hot spatula flew under the stall door and hit my feet. "Ah!" I yelled. I felt the blood leave my head when I saw embers fall onto the floor just outside the stall door. I heard footsteps without seeing any feet. I also heard a voice, gruff and low.
"Naughty boy,"
it said. At a certain point, fear turns to anger. I had reached that point, and I pulled up my pants and came out of that stall swinging. There was nobody, until I got to the mirror. I was washing my hands, and I look up and saw the tattooed man from my dream. You're... I stammered.
"I'm not your dream character. And this,"
he gestured at my rotund body in the bathroom,
"is no dream."
He tugged on the lapels of his suit coat.
"I'm Neville. I'm from somewhere much worse than your sleeping brain. Unless you want to see my hometown up close and personal, you'll call off your film projects or change your subject matter. Pronto."
A gelatinous black something slithered out from behind one of the lenses of his sunglasses and sat on the top of his bald head like a toupee of black mucus. He snapped his fingers and the slime worked his way down his leg, up one of the urinals behind him, and it shot out like the tongue of some demonic frog and grabbed my head. The slime contracted and rammed my head against the porcelain. I'm told they found me with my face in the urinal, like I had passed out trying to eat the powdered scented cake. I may have had a concussion. I didn't go to the hospital to find out for sure. Instead, I went straight home and began working on rebuilding my film project in Windows Movie Maker. Nobody, and I mean nobody, tells me what I can and cannot include in my films. Especially any of my dream figures that have the fucking audacity to say that they aren't one of my dream figures. Retracing my steps within the project was lengthy but steady. I found the same images, I found the same music, I was able to work up the same diagram and plot points to make it into a geometric configuration. I stayed up until the wee hours typing the script, recording it, and compiling it all into a rushed but otherwise finished video. Then I uploaded it. I fell asleep in my computer chair and slept rather well. I woke up earlier than I expected, probably owing to being slumped in my chair. There was time to make breakfast. I put on the coffee and dunked bread into the toaster. Yes, sir, this day was going to be mine. I went to pour the coffee when the coffee decided to suddenly grab my mug and throw it at my face. Understandably enough, I yelled. The coffee slurped onto the floor and crawled up the pant leg of the demonic Neville, who tapped his cigarette and muttered about something tickling. He was smoking in my apartment! I pretty much had enough, and I picked up my broom and swung it at Neville. He caught it like I was swinging a pool noodle. He kicked me backwards. The kinetic black gelatin rushed behind me and fanned out into a super sticky web in time to catch me, and there I was, like a spider's lunch.
"John Linaska," he began, "seeker of forbidden knowledge."
He swung the broom around until it became a large viper with vivid copper eyes and a long black tongue that tasted the air.
"Finder of forbidden knowledge."
He held the viper by the tail and let it put its snout in my face. The tongue tickled my cheek.
"Disseminator of forbidden knowledge."
I opened my mouth to say something, but the viper seized on the moment to grab my tongue. I felt the fangs puncture the soft tissue and swell with poison. I screamed the most honest scream I know.
"You're a few turns and tumbles from solving reality's Rubik's Cube, and finding out what very fabric reality is woven from."
He snapped his wrist, and the viper became a sharp metal hook that was pierced through my tongue. He pulled on it, bringing my bulging eyes within an inch of his glasses. I could see my reflection. I looked like a frightened farm animal.
"And you're too stupid to know a warning when you see one."
He took his cigarette from his tattooed lips. I was close enough to see that the cherry was a spectral face that looked as terrified as I did. He extinguished it on my tongue, and I couldn't fight off the urge to convulse. The pain was tremendous. He blew smoke up my nostrils that was 10 times more acrid than anything I've ever smelled off of a cig. He made eyes at me like he was either going to kiss me or bite my face off.
Looks like we're going to have to take you apart, brick by brick, you know, like a Jenga tower. A little pain here, a little sleep deprivation there. Add a dash of gnawing dread and good old jump scares and... well, you'll be too unraveled to spin any more yarns about the secrets of the universe.
The opposite end of the hook grew a spiked phantom chain that he flung up into the ceiling around some invisible beam or rafter and caught the end as it came back down. He gave it a tug and I was hoisted up into the air, hanging by my impaled tongue. I expected it to tear out of my head.
You won't remember your own name when I'm done with you,
he said. He gave the chain a yank and my face smashed into the ceiling. He did this several more times until I couldn't see or hear anything. I didn't make it to work. I didn't make it to the bathroom either. I lie there on my kitchen floor, a brain in a broken box, and a spreading puddle of my own piss. I thought he had stuffed a sock in my mouth or something. Nope. It was my swollen tongue. I wanted to tell someone about this development in my filmmaking career. But who would believe me? Who would even be able to understand me when I talked? Do you think I got out the yellow pages? Nope. Facebook is so much better. I expected what I saw in the movies. A rundown hole in the wall full of old books, breaded curtains, and an old crone with a Transylvanian accent. It turned out to be a very modern and comfortable little shop. The walls were white, and so was the rest of the overall color scheme. Large windows allowed for generous sunbeams. The sign out front was worthy of a Hallmark store. Its swirling, wine-colored letters spelling out Elvin's Awakening Station. Elvin herself was, well, kinda hot. She was a petite blonde with crow's feet only beginning to suggest themselves in her chestnut eyes. I thought I smelled an exotic incense in the air. Turns out it was just tea she had steeping in her cup. There was something about her that suggested that she was no charlatan. Before we had even exchanged words, I already felt like I could trust her. At the very least, if she couldn't help me, it wouldn't be because she couldn't try. She looked up from her tarot cards and smiled warmly. "Hello, how can I help you today?" No sooner than she said the words that her smile began to droop. Yes, sir, I looked bad. "Goodness gracious, you poor thing. What happened to you? Do I need to call the police?" I gestured no. With my tongue swollen up like a tomato, I barely managed one word. Haunted. Comprehension came over her eyes. "Come over here and I'll give you a reading right away." She sat me down before a very interesting configuration of a bowl of water with a mirror positioned in the bottom of it. On the right side of the mirror were 2 crystals. "I'm going to ask you to put your hand on one of the crystals and lean over the bowl, but don't look into it." I nodded. I could tell she was peering intently into the bowl. Her eyes lit up with significance. Then she was blinking, as if what she saw was far too much for her eyes to take in. She eyed me for a long moment. "You're prepared to believe me if I tell you something extreme?" I nodded as gravely as I could. She leaned forward with her chin on the tips of her fingers. "You've caught the attention of a very high-tier demon." "No flip-flop," I sputtered. I mean, what was she going to tell me next? Water's wet? But I don't understand. This is like the President of the United States leaving the White House to a beat-up homeless man in Alaska. Her eyes narrowed at me. You know something. Something that makes this presence feel threatened or intimidated. I gestured like I was scribbling in the air. She held up a finger and left the table. She came back with a legal pad and a pen. I managed to begin making the sacred geometric shape I had been working on. The single plot points, then the lines. It was when the lines began to take shape that she arrested my drawing hand. Her eyes were boring into mine with warning and fear. You're staying here tonight if you want to live. she said in a low voice. Soon, there was salt everywhere. Really exotic-looking stuff. Big and chunky and slightly pink. It was on the windowsills. The blinds were turned so that they would hold some of the salt like troughs. She smeared all kinds of smelly shit on me. And when I say shit, I mean herbs and other things. I don't think any of it was literal shit. I wasn't going to ask. Best of all, she gave me something that cut down the swelling of my tongue. I could talk again. My first intelligible words were, "Thank you." She smiled. I couldn't tell if the look in her eyes was warmth or pity. "Who else have you shown what you drew for me earlier?" "Nobody directly. I made a video about it and..." Her eyes widened at my words. "I uploaded it to my YouTube channel. I mean, I made a point to state that what I was talking about was speculation." The way she held herself after she heard that, she almost looked like she regretted having anything to do with me. "Here's the short version. I don't know how you learned what you know, but you're one step away from becoming the first man to go to sleep and dream of picking a flower, and then wake up with it in your hand." I blinked. "And that means knowing what makes up the threads of time and space, and knowing how to unravel them and rearrange them." "Bullshit," I said. She just smiled. "You've pretty much broadcasted knowledge that only angels and demons know. An exclusive branch of them at that. That's like learning the nuclear codes and posting them on Reddit. You've wounded some egos out there since you've figured it out entirely on your own." Great. My films were striking a nerve on a supernatural level. I felt proud of myself. Until night. Windows rattled, lights flickered, blinds swayed, but the barriers of salt held fast. I bared my teeth at the commotion. "Hell can take you and your parlor tricks back, Neville!" I shouted, sounding girlier than I hoped. "What the hell am I supposed to do with this pizza, then?" came a voice from behind the door. "Oh." I opened the door to see the most confused-looking Domino's delivery driver I had ever seen. "Sorry, the D&D crew is getting a little carried away tonight." He nodded as I tipped him, the look not leaving his face. He saluted with one hand and left. Elle came to my makeshift sleep space. She wore a furry white robe that she swore was synthetic. "Did I hear the door open?" "Yeah, sorry about that. I ordered pizza." "I told you not to open that door for anyone." "Sorry, the vegan food isn't keeping me full for more than 10 minutes at a time." She grabbed her head, looking down, then froze. "What did you do to my circle of protections?" "Oh, you mean the... Yes, the white chalk layer. You drew in it." I figured, just in case the forces that be actually make it inside, we could give them something special. I've studied my notes through Google Drive. No, really. I think I might have made something cool there. The woman did what most women do to me at least once. "Hey, get your head out of the gutter." She swatted the back of my head. The pizza box in my hand flew open, and a pseudopod of black foulness shot out and knocked Elle's head off in a clean separation. Her blood jetted onto her hard work laid on the floor around me. The blackness from the pizza box grew into the towering shape of Neville, who looked even more sinister than before. He looked me up and down and shook his head. "I was going to slowly tear your mind apart. Now I think I'll drag you to hell with me, and we'll burn that body in very, very creative ways. We have more square feet of flesh than the average bear, which means you have more pain receptors to play with." He sauntered towards me. "I'm saving your blood for my very best wine glass." I flicked out a knife I had hidden. "Looks like you're getting just a few drops." And with that, I slashed my own throat, my spewing blood mingling with Elle's. I registered the falter in Neville's air of self-assurance. I managed to take my palm and douse it in my hot blood and stamp a few prints along the white chalk outline. "You're no sorcerer." His words were cut off as the pool mingled with blood and launched 12 furious cats at him. Cats using the blood to manifest. The very cats that were orphaned by Shannon's air conditioner. Oh boy, were they pissed about starving to death. The blood cats mauled Neville into a pile of ashes. The way he cried as he plummeted down back towards his home told me that he wasn't going to receive his successful debriefing. I floated above my body that was bleeding out. I was mildly surprised to find that I felt an upward tug. I could resist it, but it was slowly mounting with strength. So, you know what? I visited Rebecca to tell her goodbye. She was sleeping on her side with her face nuzzled into her pillow. I gave her a little speech that may or may not have sounded as creepy as it was wistful. Not that she could hear me. I finished with telling her that I hoped that she would make management someday. By then, the upward tug was irresistible, and I stopped fighting it. The night was full of stars, and they only got more breathtaking on the way up.
Suicide Watch. Written by E. Matthews. Narrated by Brenden Bean. Featuring Steve Taylor, Rebecca Peason, and SungWon Cho. Produced by Luke Hodgkinson. Music by Brandon Boone. The light shining through the window burns my eyes, even though it is muted by the clouds. It's almost like a spotlight shining straight on my face. I hear the rustling of trees and the faint, soothing melody of rain on the glass. I don't know why I love the rain so much. I guess it was the only sound in the house I could listen to when my dad was beating my mother. Her screams still echo in my head. The inescapable sound of his repeated strikes still seemed to reverberate through the halls and off the hard wood. They found me with the rope around my neck and had me committed to Hillcrest, the local crazy house. I'm under suicide watch, which is not exactly the place to be on a Saturday. To be honest, I'd rather be dead. But look how that went. You can't always get what you want. Orderlies keep shuffling by, as if something is going on down the hall in Sophie's room. I leave my bed and make my way to the door, hearing more and more nurses and patients moving around the hall. I hear them being reassured that nothing is happening, but I see through their comforting lie. I can tell something bad has happened. So I poke my head out and look. If nothing were going on, there would not be 7 people huddled outside of Sophie's door. I see one nurse in tears. I recognize her. She's the redhead who spent a lot of time with Sophie. I always liked that nurse. She was pretty, and not to be that guy, but damn, she could be a model. That aside, the redhead was a little more patient than the other nurses. Sophie was an especially difficult case, as any schizophrenic would be. It took more than a calm smile, a stupid puzzle, or a game of checkers to take care of her. I imagine that the two were friends on the outside, maybe even family. As I step out into the hall, a male nurse looks at me and points back behind me, silently demanding that I step back into my room. But this isn't a dictatorship, and I'll take a fork in the ass before I take orders from a nurse.
Back to your room, Bobby.
He finally demands after enduring the coldest stare I could produce with my thick eyebrows. It's Robbie, I reply, although I'm not sure he knows the difference. He doesn't seem too bright to me.
Listen.
He steps closer to me, an admonishing look on his smug face.
It's important that you just stay in your room for now. We need to take care of something.
I ponder this for a moment, as his gaze shifts from that of an authoritarian to one of actual concern, perhaps even regret. I know if I say what I am about to say too loudly, it could cause a panic. I'm sad, but not crazy. I can hold it together. So out of consideration for the other patients, I lean in a little closer and speak quietly. Sophie's dead, isn't she? The look on his face expresses both anguish and discomfort at the same time. I am not stupid. If people crowd around a live patient, it could cause a lot of problems. It could overwhelm them, scare them, and cause their paranoia to intensify, culminating in a violent fit. No. Sophie couldn't handle that many people at one time. She was dead. The male nurse retreats with a sad look on his face and just walks away. He can't protect me from anything. Not when I can figure it out on my own. He knows I'm not a gossip either. I keep to myself mostly. I can't help but smile as he turns his back to me. It feels like a victory, like a triumph over an enemy. I understand why he's trying to contain me at first. What they should have done was put Sophie in a body bag on a gurney. They should have taken Sophie away before it caused a fuss. I don't know why they didn't. I walked towards Sophie's room. Schizophrenia aside, she was a sweet girl. Sophie was young. She was maybe 19, 3 years older than me. I remember a conversation I once tried to have with her about the economy. I had so many solutions and ideas. She didn't quite understand, so she changed the subject and started talking about cats. I wouldn't exactly call her my friend, but my stomach is still sick as I approach the door. It is a decision I regret immediately. I turn away from the disgusting mess and Ralph all over one of the nurse's scrubs. The redhead grabs me gently by my shoulders and moves me away. In any other situation, I would have pulled away from her grasp, but I wanted to leave this time. I only stared at it for a few seconds, and I know that the image will never leave me. It's like she exploded or turned inside out. Sophie's walls and ceiling drip with blood and chunks of flesh. Her intestines are roped around the room loosely, and her heart is in the hand of her skeleton. The pictures of cats on her wall are coated in gore and peeling off, and her skin is it's just gone. I understand now why they haven't done anything yet. They have no idea what to do. None of this makes sense. How could someone do this? And so quietly? Isn't it impossible? It takes a few minutes before I stop vomiting. I never imagined that this would be why the redhead nurse and I would be alone in the bathroom. It is sickening to even think about the fact that the mess in here was once a person. Sophie was a girl who loved cats. She loved drawing with markers and crayons like a kid. I look up from the toilet, my face red, veins bulging from my forehead. My face is dripping with snot and drool. I sit on the floor. The nurse is to my left with her hand on my shoulder. Her name tag, with a picture of her face, says her name is Melissa Wolf. I wipe my face in the sleeve of my white shirt and hang my head.
Are you all right, Robbie?
She asks me that, of all things. No, I reply sharply. My voice is nearly gone, but with what is left of it, I continue. I don't know what to make of it. The image plays through my head more and more, getting brighter, more vivid every time I blink. I see Sophie's shredded remains strewn everywhere in the room. Needless to say, I can't sleep tonight. Not without meds anyway. Melissa, the redheaded nurse, gave me some pills before bed. I didn't know what they were, and I didn't care. I just threw them down my throat and shut up about it. As I lay here, hours after Melissa has gone, I hear a scratching sound coming from right outside of my door. I jump from my bed and slam my back to the wall. I shout, cursing whatever is on the other side of that door. Slowly, I slide down the wall and sit with my head in my knees, shaking in what? Fear? No, I think this is anger. I am angry at whatever took Sophie. I am angry at the fact that I ever survived the noose. I can't help but think, maybe I never wanted to die. Maybe I just wanted revenge. I transition from the floor to my feet and furiously open the door to find a cat. Just a cat. It's small and black, looking at me with its eyes half closed. Its tail sways left and right a couple times. It meows and runs down the hall in the direction opposite of Sophie's room. I step into the hall for the first time since the incident. I look to my left, towards Sophie's room, and hang my head in despair. After a moment of silence, I turn right and see the cat scratch at another door and look back at me, so I walk towards it. The door that the cat is scratching on provides access to a stairwell. It leads me down to the basement where the laundry room is. Or so I've heard. As I pass the front desk heading to the door, I have an eerie feeling. The place is empty. The nurses are gone. Usually, they have at least a few on staff at all times, but where are they? Moving slowly, constantly looking around me for any sign of people, I reach the door. The cat scratches at it one more time and then backs up to let me through. So I open it, and we head down into the basement. We go down a flight of stairs, through the laundry room and into what looks like a secondary infirmary. Is this normal? I don't know much about hospitals, but they usually keep their patients above ground. And this place is really clean. It's stocked with medicine and new equipment. I look to my left and see the cat perched atop a table. Beside it is a document inside of a file folder. I imagine that is why the cat is here. It is signaling and guiding me. I have no clue how it is possible, but I imagine I may find answers if I keep moving. So I grab the file and open it. It is Sophie's patient file. It has her full name, Sophie Ann Bishop. It says that she was a paranoid schizophrenic. Then it says the impossible. Cause of death, suicide. Whatever happened to Sophie, it clearly was not suicide. Nobody rips their own heart out of their chest, wraps their entrails around the room and self-destructs. Something's wrong here, very wrong. I noticed the cat leap from the table and jump to a counter. Next to the sink, taped to a cabinet door, is a letter of some sort. It has the name of the hospital, with the logo at the top. It's signed by Dr. Bill Marcus. I know Dr. Marcus, he's a good man. He seems very caring and always makes jokes to lighten the mood. I grab the note from the cabinet door and read it quietly to myself.
These incompetent nurses here at Hillcrest Mental Facility have absolutely no regard for procedure. They become emotionally involved with the patients, and in the face of certain events have no clue as to how they should react. They're not here to be their friends. They're here because our patients are sick. They can't handle the real world safely. The nurses treat them like real people. It's just wrong. The other day, I spoke with a spiky-haired young man with a near-erotic obsession with burning things. He says fire is essential to existence and loves to spread it in order to pay proper respect to the illuminating wonder that is fire. He worships fire like it's Baal. I can assure you, none of these people are capable of any normal way of thinking. I've subjected them to a new medication intended to alter their behavior. Well, the drug remains to be named, but after the success we've had with a paranoid schizophrenic named Sophie, I firmly believe that this new medication is a real game changer. Even our most violent and resilient subjects have become like doorstops. The human trials have been a complete success, and I will be secretly using the drug on half of the people within the facility.
What the hell? I can hardly breathe. It feels like I've been punched right in the stomach. We're not people here at Hillcrest. We're experiments. As I consider the letter for a moment, I recall Tom, the spiky-haired young man that the doctor referred to. Tom was an arsonist, and a good one at that. He and I recently had a discussion about fire. Dr. Marcus was right. He practically worshipped the stuff. Tom's brother snuck in some matches for me once so I could smoke. I don't know how they got them in through security, but I don't think I'd like the answer. I put a cigarette in my mouth. I am shaking so hard, I can barely light the damn thing. For whatever reason, I am afraid that I have taken the drug. I don't feel docile. I never was easily manageable anyway. I feel like if I see Dr. Marcus right now, I will tear him a new one. We're experiments. We're nothing but experiments. Then, I hear a loud stomping. I hear the rattle of thick, heavy chains and a faint groaning. Something big is headed my way. I put out the cigarette on my tongue and swallow it. I can't leave any real trace of me being here, and you can definitely smell the smoke. It is the most disgusting thing I've ever done, but I do it again. I hide in a small cabinet and close the door most of the way. I leave only a small crack to see out of. I have no idea where the cat is. The chains, the stomping of heavy feet, they get closer, closer, closer still until I can finally see him. It is a large man wrapped in gauze. He has large chains in his hand and around his shoulders. His face is riddled with stitches. His eyes are black and shark-like, lacking any trace of humanity. I can tell that this man has no soul. As he looks around, I can see he has no nose. I'd call that dumb luck. Eventually, after flipping over some tables and breaking everything at eye level, he turns and leaves. I wait until I can no longer hear him. I then slowly open the door and exit the cabinet. I am curious about what is going on in this hospital. Something is very wrong, and I know I have to leave. My curiosity gets the better of me. I search around to find the cat, but it's gone. I look around. Behind a broken glass cabinet, I notice an opening. It's a secret passageway. I push the cabinet the best I can. There's just enough room to squeeze into the opening. I shuffle through the glass and broken metal, getting small shards caught in my slippers. Then the lights go out. I move faster, and in my panic I trip, falling into what feels like a cavern of some kind. When I finally land, I feel a sharp pain as something punctures my left side. I feel it with my hand. It's a bone. It's not one of mine, though. I pull it out and feel blood trickle down my waist. It isn't a very deep wound, but it hurts. I need to see how bad it is, so I take out my matches again and light one. I pull up my shirt to reveal the wound. I am relieved to see it is just a bad scratch. When I look up, I'm stunned, frozen in fear. I stare Sophie in the face. She is like a ghost, with lifeless eyes rimmed in black. Her pupils are tiny. Where her eyes had once been green, they were now without color. Her face is more pallid than I recall. There is no doubt in my mind. This is Sophie Spector. Her mouth seems to be dripping thin, green ooze. The only things I recognize are her dark hair and the marks on her forehead from her habit of slamming her face into walls. She lifts her hand. She is holding 5 white pills, and slowly she looks down away from me. Her hand edges its way to my face. I try, but I am unable to speak. For whatever reason, she wants me to take these pills. I summon the courage to smack her hand away. As I do, I fall backwards into a pile of human skulls and bones. I break and clumsily fumble about, trying to stand. When I am on my feet, she is once again right in front of me. This time, she is right in my face. She tries to push the drugs in my mouth. I cry a little as I yell at her, "No! I won't become like you. I have to stay alive." The words stop me. I step back, still crying at the realization. I never wanted to die. I just wanted a different life. Maybe even a second chance. A fresh start someplace far from here. Her ghost fades in a foggy flurry as large chains wrap around my neck and pull me down, flat on my face. I slam my head hard. I feel my cheekbone crack and my eye socket crumble a little. My nose gushes. I put one hand on the ground and try to stand. The chains pull again, and I am flung forward towards the large man I avoided in the infirmary. He grabs my throat over the chains and lifts me in the air. I kick my feet as I lose consciousness. I come to, in a metal chair, to discover that I am restrained by leather straps. I can't see out of my right eye. I can't smell anything or hear out of my right ear. My vision is blurry and my entire body is numb. My legs are numb and unresponsive. My heart speeds up as I hear lighter footsteps to my left. I hear a medical tray swing up next to me. When I hear the frighteningly warm laughter, I know who it is. Dr. Marcus? I ask, quietly trying not to choke on the blood in my mouth.
Well,
he replies,
look at you. Had a nice trip, I see. Sorry about the big guy. He can play a bit rough sometimes. What he did to that Sophie girl, it was just a bit much, wasn't it?
Why are you doing this?
It's simple, kid.
He moves the tray in front of me, and I see an eye in a jar. I just know it is mine.
You see? No pun intended. The people here aren't real people. They don't have real emotions, and nobody really cares about them. Most of our patients get dumped here and left to rot. No visitors, no friends, no family. They have nobody. I have an opportunity to be an innovator. I can forever alter the way these medical proceedings are executed. I can change the world. And you?
He grabs a scalpel from the tray, plays with it in his hand, and sets it back down. I try to wiggle out of the chair, but I appear to be paralyzed. I am helpless. Then he laughs. With such malice, he may as well be Satan himself. We were all blind to it. I scream as he grabs a large pair of scissors.
You tried to leave this world. I studied your file. You tried to hang yourself. But Mommy forgot her keys. You don't deserve this world, crybaby. No one would be surprised if you, well, I don't know, snuck out for a smoke and jumped in front of a truck.
Why can't I move? What have you done to me?
Well, for starters, I removed your legs.
He cut something with the scissors. As his hand comes into sight, I can see he has taken a few of my fingers.
And then there are these.
He laughs once more, but much louder. Fear burns in me. If I wasn't sedated, I still wouldn't be able to move. I can tell that my head is strapped down as well. It almost makes sense to me now. I could never get inside of his head enough to understand why he's doing this. Still, it all falls into place. Unfortunately, I can do nothing. I watch in silence as he tears my body apart. He hacks my remaining fingers, and then an entire hand. It's almost like he wants to create more monsters like the freak that killed Sophie. I understand now why Sophie wanted me to take the pills. They would have killed me. It was a courtesy. But now I'm doomed to be like the large man with all of the stitches. Marcus will use the medicine to control me, and I won't care. I'm nobody. I was just going to die anyway.
Ever since the beginning of time, when God first came upon the face of the earth and banished darkness into the deepest corners, there has always been evil. A malevolent force bent on revenge against the great being of light and his creations. Being the all-seeing entity that he is, God recognized this evil and knew its intentions, so the Almighty established two bodies of light, the sun, and gave it authority over day, and the moon, a lesser light that watched over the night. The sun performed its duties to perfection. It kept the darkness at bay. However, that moon, well, let's just say the moon is a fickle thing. It is constantly sleeping with its eye half open. Even when the moon is fully awake, it does a poor job of keeping the darkness away. Then there are times when the moon doesn't show up at all. Oh yes, that moon is a fickle thing. And sometimes I question its allegiance. Andrew Smith could see the full moon at the edge of his peripheral. He had been grateful for its presence when darkness first descended, but for some unexplained reason, the young man had grown wary of the celestial body. The moon seemed to follow Andrew, and he knew his suspicion to be crazy thinking. The way the moon appeared to focus on him made Andrew uneasy. Therefore, he found a bit of relief when it disappeared behind the first set of raw-constructed buildings. Ghost town, Andrew muttered. A line of interconnected buildings stretched along his right-hand side. A similar set of buildings also set on his left. Together they formed a town that rested in the middle of a forsaken desert. Andrew gripped the front of his wide-brimmed gambler's hat and tilted it upwards so he could have a better view of the wooden establishments. His brown eyes searched the darkened windows for any signs of life. As he walked on, nothing stirred within the buildings. Another one bites the dust. Ghost towns had become a regular sight for him as he made his way from the prejudiced South, looking to make a new life in the Northwest. Settlers from all over the United States were rushing towards the new frontier, hoping to find a prosperous life. Many had created settlements like the one Andrew stumbled upon, and after finding the land inhospitable, they had moved on. There were numerous ghost towns strewn across the Wild West. Andrew's dusty black boots clunked against the hard ground. A warm wind blew through the town, causing his rifle frock coat to billow about his ankles as he strolled down the street of what the slanted welcome sign dubbed as Windfalls. Because of its small stature, Andrew figured the town was a trading post in its heyday. He could feel the light weight of his satchel hanging from his shoulder, a blatant reminder that he would have to search the town for provisions come morning. His trip had taken much longer than he had expected after having to put down his horse, North Star. The poor thing had twisted its ankle in a concealed hole out in that barren wasteland. A lame horse was nothing more than a hindrance. So Andrew did what he had to do. With his trip extended, his supplies barely allowed him to make it to Windfalls. More important was that his body demanded sleep. Andrew made his way to the nearest building for some well-needed rest. Is it possible that the moon is a sentient being? Let's say the moon is capable of having rational thoughts and feelings. Let's say the moon watched me on that life-altering night. It watched me as I entered the abandoned inn I chose for shelter. I remember being thankful for the moonlight that shone through several windows, helping me to find my way. I was thankful, but I should have been afraid, for that silvery moonlight was nothing more than the moon's attention fixed on me. It lost me as I made my way up a set of rickety stairs, but found me again when I entered a room on the second floor. I unwittingly made my way into its luminous light of sight, set my stuff down and made camp. I felt secure in the moon's glow, but what I should have felt was fear. Because let's say the moon hung there in the sky and watched as I inventoried my belongings, that the moon waited until I fell asleep before it grabbed a nearby cloud and pulled it across its face. I have no idea if the moon is a sentient being. I do know for one reason or another, the moon hid its face and evil was given free rein. An hour after Andrew fell asleep upon the floor of that abandoned inn, a mysterious wind blew through the desert, pushing along the few clouds that hung in the sky. One large cloud in particular drifted across the starry background until it blocked the light of the moon. Then the wind ceased just as quickly as it started. The wooden buildings shuddered. Rusty wind chimes cried out in alarm. Skeletal hands lifted from fissures that appeared on the main street of Windfalls, jutting upward like devilish plants. Bony arms followed hands, bent at the elbows to push against the ground in order to elevate their bodies. Skulls appeared, and those ghastly craniums groaned as they hauled themselves from their unmarked graves. After the dirt-stained skulls came necks, then spines and rib cages, and finally the pelvic bones and legs. In moments, dozens of skeletons looked around as if familiarizing themselves with their environment. The skeletons stood in silence for several seconds. Another gust of wind swept the land. Great clouds of dust rose up and swirled around the rattling undead. Dirt clung to their bones, thickening until it made putrid flesh. The evil forces at work appeared to be using God's recipe for creating mankind, but with horrifying results. Rancid meat and tattered skin now covered the skeletons, making them nothing more than zombies one might hear talked about around campfires. Although the real McCoy was much worse than anyone's imagination could conceive. The ghastly zombies staggered about, testing out their recently formed limbs. They moaned as a way to exercise their vocal cords. The first zombie found his voice. It was an unearthly sound, chilling to the bone, and its first words were, A loud whooping noise pulled Andrew from his slumber. His eyes snapped open. He remained on the dusty floor, staring up at the ceiling, listening to his surroundings. He heard a multitude of voices from outside. What's going on? Andrew considered the possibility that a band of ruffians had come along. Needless to say, such an occurrence would not bode well for him. Ruffians were merciless to anyone not part of their gang, and the fact that Andrew was a colored man would only make matters worse. Oh Lord, I need your protection. He pushed his blanket aside and rolled over onto his knees. He crawled across the floor until he came to a stop in front of the only window. Ever so slowly, he lifted his head and peered down to the street. Old lanterns gave light to the town, and it was by these lights that Andrew was able to see people moving about. Men with debonair attire and women wearing fancy dresses strolled up and down the main street, entering and exiting buildings. They did not appear to be ruffians, but there was no doubt that what had been a ghost town just a few hours ago now brimmed with life. Andrew questioned his eyes as he stared down at the people going about their business. Did a caravan decide to hunker down for a spell just as he had? His thoughts were interrupted by muffled whispering and giggling from just outside the door. He spun away from the enigmatic scene below and fixed his eyes on the splintered barrier to his room. Andrew's heart pounded furiously. He waited a few minutes hoping that the people would go away. But the playful conversation continued. He scrambled across the dusty floor and proceeded to gather his belongings, throwing them into his satchel. He hastily dressed and scanned the floor once more to ensure he had not forgotten anything. When satisfied, Andrew crept to the door. He placed his ear against the wood and listened. The flirtatious conversation tapered off, only to be replaced by sloppy-sounding kisses and sensual moaning. All I have to do is walk out there like I belong. How are they to know I don't? Andrew took a deep, steadying breath, then opened the door and stepped into the hallway. A hermit crab is a creature born weak and defenseless. It comes into this world without a shell, without a home. Because of this, a newborn hermit crab must find a shell. The crab does not craft a shell of its own. It comes across the remains of a dead sea snail and moves in. One creature's death aids to the continuance of another's life. Now, with that said, consider the demon. Much like the hermit crab, demonic creatures are weak and defenseless when they first enter the land of the living. Without a vessel, they are nothing more than shades. So their first task is to find a shell absent of its previous tenant. For a demon cannot create one of its own. I admit, the thought had never occurred to me before I came across Windfalls. The place was an empty shell filled with a demonic presence. Exiting the room, I did not look at the couple and think that they were empty vessels filled with evil. No. When I stepped into that hallway draped with cobwebs and coated with grime, I was offended at how they halted to stare at me. How you fine folks doing this evening? I asked with a nod of my head. I tried to ignore their stare as I strolled past them, but in my mind I was experiencing the very racism that had forced me to leave Alabama. I walked down to the saloon on the first floor. Lantern light illuminated the room. Tobacco smoke and the smell of whiskey permeated the air. As soon as my boots touched the landing, all activity froze. The card game being played on the far left corner of the room halted. The pianist stopped tickling the ivories. The bartender stopped performing his duties, and every patron paused their conversations. All eyes focused on me. Racist bastards, I thought. An understandable reaction considering the circumstance. I had intended on leaving as fast as I could, but once confronted with such a disrespectful display, I chose to stand my ground. Every man is created equal, and by God, I was going to get the respect due. I cringe with shame when I think about how my pride nearly cost me my life that night. Andrew gazed about the crowded room. He was an unwilling stage performer standing before a captivated audience. Eventually, the surprise he experienced from their coordinated actions wore off and was replaced by outrage. They acted as if they had never seen a colored man. Andrew figured if that was the case, he would be more than happy for them to make his acquaintance. He recomposed himself before sauntering over to the bar. The sound of his boots clopping against the wooden floor was the only thing to be heard. "Good day to you," Andrew said happily, addressing one of the slack-jawed men seated at the bar and receiving no response. Oh well, he claimed the splintered bar stool stationed to the right of the rude fella. Once seated, Andrew removed his hat and set it on the counter. He looked to the burly barkeep. "Whiskey on the rocks." The man cleared his throat. "We ain't got no ice. Straight will do." "Whiskey straight, coming up." And as suddenly as things halted, everything resumed. The patrons returned to their conversations. Cursing and raucous laughter erupted over at the card table, and the piano began emitting a lively tune. Andrew looked over his shoulder, watching everyone go about their business. It was as if somebody blew a whistle that he couldn't hear. Something ain't right. The bartender slammed a glass on the countertop, returning Andrew's attention forward. "2 coppers, the brute said. Andrew pulled a silver piece from his purse and slid the coin over to the man. "Keep the change." "Much obliged." The bartender reached for the silver coin, and when he did, the cloud covering the moon shifted. Perhaps the winds of fortune blew in, or the moon felt a twinge of guilt. Whatever the reason, a ray of moonlight broke through the overcast and entered one of the establishment's dirt-stained windows. The luminescent beam highlighted the dust motes in its path and rested on the bartender's hand. Andrew watched as the hand transformed from grimy flesh to nothing but bones with tattered, decayed meat hanging from it. The shaft of the moonlight only lasted a few seconds before the silvery disk was covered by clouds once more. The saloon became quiet, causing Andrew to slowly glance to his left. The slack-jawed man stared directly at him with a ravenous look in his eyes. Andrew turned his head to the right and saw the same expression in the eyes of the other men along the bar. "I guess I'll be moving along." His statement was interrupted by the barkeep lunging towards him. The man wrapped his hairy hands around Andrew's neck and yanked him over the counter. Andrew's flailing legs kicked his stool over. Drinking glasses flew and shattered. The bartender slammed him down where his head thumped hard against the floor. Andrew's vision wavered. His hand fumbled for his holster. The bartender loomed over him. The zombie's mouth opened wide, bearing rotten teeth. Slobber dripped from his gaping maw, and the stench of death wafted out. It unleashed a heart-wrenching roar before rushing forward. Quickly pulling his revolver up to the zombie's chin, Andrew cocked the hammer back and pulled the trigger. Brain matter and blood sprayed his face as the barkeep's head exploded. His eardrums rang from the deafening shot. There was no time to be repulsed. Andrew pushed the collapsed body away and climbed to his feet just in time to see the other zombies hurrying across the room, the majority of them already clambering over the bar. "Come here, boy," one yelled. Andrew shot off a hand that reached for him. He sent another bullet into the monster's head, sending it crashing to the floor. 3 more headshots fired. 3 more fell. Andrew holstered the smoking pistol and removed a second gun. In the midst of changing weapons, he watched the undead rush the bar like it was happy hour, and he was the only man on duty. Andrew cursed. He hopped onto the bar, stomping a hand beneath his boot, snapping a zombie's head back before it collapsed. Andrew raced down the length of the bar. When he reached its end, he leapt over the horde, coat flapping behind him and knees raised high to avoid the extended hands. He landed before the saloon's double doors and rushed right through, running full speed down the steps and then halting with his attention focused on the open desert beyond Windfalls. He began to move in that direction, but his nearly empty satchel brought him to a stop. Damn, supplies! Andrew scanned the buildings lining the main street and noticed that all activities had stopped. The women held the hems of their dresses out of the dirt, but they no longer walked. The men also stood paused. Much like in the saloon, the town had grown quiet. Every pair of eyes focused on him. I miss when they were just racist, he groaned. The saloon doors exploded and Andrew's drinking buddies rushed out. The zombies standing in the streets quickly charged in his direction. Despite his frantic mindset, Andrew managed to spot a decrepit general store. He sprinted to the opposing porch and burst into the dimly lit shop. Can I help you? A bullet tore through the head of the old man standing behind the cash register. His knees buckled and the counter's edge cracked his skull. Andrew sprinted over to the dust-covered shelves without missing a beat. He came across some grimy canned goods with no labels and tossed them into his satchel. The rusty bell above the shop's door jingled. Andrew spun around to find the undead spilling in through the entrance. He raised his pistol and fired a shot, knocking one unholy creature to the floor, temporarily plugging up the doorway. Andrew hurried over to the cash register. Jars were positioned next to the machine. He reached into one and removed some jerky. He grabbed a handful of rice from another container and some dried beans from a third. The shop quickly crowded. A fluttering lamplight caused their shadows to dance upon the wall. Before attempting an escape, Andrew knelt behind the counter to reload his revolvers. His trembling hands dropped a couple of bullets. Damn it! He retrieved the stray rounds and loaded them along with others into his pistols, then clicked the barrels into place. Andrew took a deep breath, said a prayer, and hopped up from behind the counter like a jack-in-the-box springing out of its prison. Andrew cocked the hammers on both pistols and pulled the triggers. The two zombies nearest to him fell. Andrew climbed into the counter and fired 4 more rounds before jumping into the crowd. Decaying hands took hold of him. Andrew wriggled out of his coat and moved forward. A mob stood before the door, gnashing their teeth and groping. Andrew fired 2 more shots. The aroma of spent gunpowder filled the air. Shrugging off hands and kicking away bodies, Andrew made his way outside. Both hammers cocked back again and the zombies that fell allowed Andrew to break through the mob. Only 2 more bullets, Andrew reminded himself. Everyone in town appeared to have gathered at the general store. He cut past them until his path to freedom was unobstructed. He raced along the dirt road, heading towards the edge of town. All Andrew had to do was pass beneath the slanted welcoming sign and he would be home free. 100 yards became 80, then 60, then 45. The distance standing between him and the exit of the godforsaken town dwindled. The zombies fell further and further behind. Then Andrew noticed a watering trough off to the side and came to a sudden stop. He glanced back at the approaching mob and then to the watering trough. He only had 2 bullets left, 1 per revolver. Knowing he wouldn't last without water, Andrew hurried over to the trough. The zombies were 80 yards away. He laid his pistols down and removed a nearly empty canteen from his satchel. 70 yards. Andrew unscrewed the canteen's top. Come on, come on, come on! His heart beat furiously in his chest. 50 yards. When the top came undone, Andrew took hold of the water spout's handle and pushed down. The apparatus creaked, but no water came out. Please! The dead were only about 35 yards away. He picked up one of his pistols and fired it at the crowd. One zombie fell. Many more continued onward. One bullet left. Andrew lifted the handle and pushed it back down hard. Nothing. He said another prayer as he lifted and lowered the handle once more. A drip of water spilled into his canteen. His heart was on the verge of busting from his chest. Only 20 yards separated him from the zombies. There was no way he could get the water and escape. 10 yards. Andrew picked up his pistol and fired his last bullet. That lone round did not factor into his survival, but one less zombie would be feasting on his innards. He dropped the pistol and resumed pumping. A great deal of water emerged. His next draw from the faucet brought even more, and it was not as brown with rust. 8 yards. Andrew frantically screwed the cap onto his canteen. 5. The stampeding undead were finally upon him. Their teeth chomped hungrily, hands stretched outward in hopes of being the first to feast. In one quick motion, Andrew shouldered the canteen and swept down for his guns. 3 yards. I should have saved a bullet for myself. The lead zombie tackled Andrew to the ground and the rest piled on, wrestling for a taste of flesh. Andrew screamed and thrashed with every bit of energy, but the weight was too much. He gritted his teeth and held his breath to keep from inhaling the rotten aroma. Get it over with, Andrew thought, and let his muscles relax. Just then, a ray of sunlight peeked over the horizon. As they began to rip into him, Andrew closed his eyes and prayed. But for the third time in less than an hour, the zombies halted. Tendrils of smoke rose from their eyeballs as they stared at that wink of brilliance. Suddenly, their flesh burst into flames. Painful howls emitted by the undead caused Andrew to close his eyes even tighter, preventing him from seeing the zombies dissipate into clouds of ash and dust and bone. Andrew lay beneath the skeletal remains, body in the fetal position, hands covering his head. When he finally opened his eyes, he peered through the bones and saw the sun chasing away the last bit of darkness. Can't say for certain if the sun and moon are sentient beings, but that morning, as I clawed my way from beneath the hill of corpses, I developed a new respect for that fiery orb, which rules the day with an iron fist. And as the weakened moon slunk away with the fleeing darkness, I developed a suspicion. Andrew Smith.
Chilling tales for dark nights.